welcome everyone. My name is Tania Evans from WorkPro, and I'll be the one facilitating this very short webinar today on administering Australian police checks. There are quite a number of people on this call, on this webinar, and having had a quick look through, you're all existing customers of WorkPro. So this webinar should be relatively easy to do, and there's a couple of things I'll craft the webinar around this morning just to address those because you're existing customers. So without further ado, I'm logging into the platform as an administrator, and you're now requesting an applicant to complete a police check. There's a couple of configurations to WorkPro that I just want to mention before I go into the requesting area and administration area, and that is you have a few options now. One is you can configure your system so that you can have the candidate pay for the check, or you can pay for the police check, and you can do that check by check. We just configure your system to turn that availability on. We also have the opportunity for you to have WorkPro simply manage the entire process on your behalf. So once you've sent the request to the applicant, you can just sit back, take it easy. Once the candidate's completed all they need to do, it will simply bypass you. You'll still get a status update, but it will bypass you. You don't have to view the documents. You don't have to validate the identity. You can simply leave that in WorkPro's capable hands. We'll manage the rejections if there are any. We'll manage the identity validation. And once the check has been completed, you'll still receive every alert. You'll still see the status update, and you'll still see the result of the check. So for those of you that are interested in the candidate pay option or the WorkPro to manage those checks, please reach out to us, let us know, and we'll simply configure your account. So sending the request to the applicant, and those that know WorkPro, you will have already completed this process many times. Oops. So background check, Australian police check, and you can see that I've got this service turned on. Do you want the individual to pay for the check? In this case, I'll say no. Do you have a role for the individual? Yes, I do. So there's been some changes by ACIC over the course of the last few months, but those that are using WorkPro police checks regularly will have seen these, and this won't be any surprise to you. So the employment type is for employment, so that's the purpose of the check. The role that the person's doing. I had the opportunity to meet with ACIC last week in Canberra, and we're presenting on things like roles and the purpose and what they believe are the things they're looking for and why they reject certain checks. So be really careful with this role and the industry they're working within, because ACIC can and do reject checks on this basis. So try and be as clear as you can be, but also concise. So I'm just saying testing, that's probably quite vague actually. And the industry that the person is working in, so let's just say transport logistics. And this does make a difference. So if someone applies for a check, we submit a check through ACIC, it hits the database and does various cross-references looking at different algorithms. And if a check has been referred, that's when these things become important. So they, if you're referred, there was a manual investigation conducted by police in certain states and certain jurisdictions, depending on where the referred status has appeared. So they will look at the role, they will look at the purpose of the check, and they do look at the industry the person's working within, and they determine whether they need to disclose certain criminal information. All right, so that is really important. What state the person is working within, and whether they will have contact with vulnerable groups or not. So say supervised contact. The custom field here is really for you guys. This has got nothing to do with ACIC. This is really if you have a project that you're trying to allocate these police checks to, or you have a group of workers, you can add that information here so that it will appear on your reconciliation at the end of the month. Looking at third parties, this really applies to recruitment agencies. So I can see there's a few recruiters on the call. So for recruiting agencies, if you plan on sharing a police check with one of your clients, it's really important that the candidate or the applicant understands who that client may be, and they provide informed consent as part of the application process. So you'll be filling this out here. So let me just pop in Coca-Cola. I'll just search, or say Coca-Cola is going to be receiving a copy of this check. Once that's done, you send the request. the candidate receives their request via email. That email contains the task, a live link and a single-use token. You can track the request through this dashboard. If the person doesn't complete their task within a certain period of time, our system starts to automate reminders. So those reminders are sent as 3 reminders 5 days apart. Logging out and now signing up as the applicant. If the applicant already has a WorkPro profile, rather than signing up again, they're simply logging into the system. WorkPro works on any device, so mobile, iPad, in my case, a laptop. Signing up. And I've already got a WorkPro profile. Let me just go back. Of course I do. Let me see whether this will be accepted. Fantastic. All right. So the token is entered. 2 tasks to complete. Just get past this fair work statement. And background checks. And you can see here 1 background check has been requested, and that is the Australian police check, and inviting the person to start their check. The person is just simply following the application process. There shouldn't be too much of a problem. Contact details have already been ticked because I've provided those at registration. Addresses, ACIC expect to see 10 years of address history. So let's just say 2018 for the purposes of this application. And you can see here it's now asking me, sorry, it's 5 years, not 10 years. 10 years is New Zealand. Uh, 2000 to 2018. Save. Next. That's now collected. Very clear instructions about what the person is expected to do next. So this is the provision of consent. They're expected to upload 4 identity documents, and the list is shown here. This list is also available in the candidate's application request. So before the person even gets started, they can open that PDF and they can see the identity that's going to be acceptable, get their identity ready to upload. Clicking continue, and you can see the applicant details, the type of check, etc. that's been requested of them. You can see here the release of police information. Risk Solutions Australia is WorkPro, and Coca-Cola, your organisation, would be shown here, and clicking next. So you can see here the upload of identity documents, exactly what's requested of them. WorkPro, I'm just going to deviate for a moment, only to just talk about those who are non-Australian citizens. WorkPro is integrated seamlessly with the Department of Home Affairs Vivo database, which means for those that are non-Australian citizens, the commencement of identity document, the only way for them to provide a commencement of identity document is to provide a Vivo printout. So rather than them having to log out and go into the Vivo database and gather that information, they can do that right here, right now. So let me just deviate and show you what that looks like. You see here, we can perform a citizenship and work rights check on their behalf. Yes, I want to complete that check now. So as a non-Australian citizen, they're entering the details that's requested here. They're agreeing to the terms and conditions, and they're basically submitting their information straight to Vivo. It is an instant result with full disclosure certificate. So once they have that document, which is a PDF, they then go on to upload a copy of that here. Let's grab those identities. On to the next, and you can see there's fairly strict criteria around primary use, secondary use, etc. It is worth noting while I'm in this identity area that if someone who has a maiden name or an alias that they've entered as part of their personal information, they'll also be invited to upload evidence of that they are change of name. In this case, I haven't entered an alias or a maiden name, so I'm not expected to upload another piece of identity here. So clicking next, that's now loading all of that identity into WorkPro. Taking a selfie with one of my IDs, another photo ID that is. There we are. I'm expected to enter my email address again. The reason that we don't automatically populate that from the registration area is because we want people to read this information and make an informed decision about where they want the return of disclosable court outcomes, if there are any, to potentially an alternative email address. Agreeing to the terms and conditions, and now I'm electronically signing this. So I've signed that with the mouse. It's possible to do that with your finger if you're on a mobile. We understand, and so does ACIC, that they're not particularly accurate. And on that basis, we also, as vetting specialists, we also look to other forms of identity biometric testing, or checking, sorry, to make sure that that person is who they say they are prior to submitting this check. So submitting this check, and the person's now done what they need to do. So quickly logging back into the administrator area, you've now received your email alert letting you know that a police check application is ready to be viewed and processed. If you chose to configure your site or your instance of WorkPro for WorkPro to manage your check on your behalf, you will see the status change, but you won't be required to open up the check. In fact, you won't be able to open up that check. WorkPro will receive that alert and will administer the check on your behalf. We'll be checking the identity and we'll be submitting the police check on your behalf. In this case, and all of those that are on this call will be using this all day, every day. So you'll know that you need to review these documents. You're reviewing them, you're rejecting them, or you're replacing it. You don't have to check up any of these. You can see that the submit button is here. WorkPro opens up every single check, regardless of whether we are managing that on your behalf. If you choose to view these, that's fine. You can accept them, you can push it through, you can reject it. But please understand that WorkPro will also be your backstop and making sure prior to it going to ACIC, we will be your vetting specialist and we will make sure that everything is in order prior to submitting the check to ACIC. So in submitting this check, you're all done and you can see the status has been changed to sent to WorkPro for vetting. Just going to use the filtering function, and again, this really closes off, I guess, this webinar today, but just looking at finalising this check. To reiterate, and those of you that are on the call that are already using us for police checks, you will appreciate the turnaround time, the speed of turnaround time. So once the check has been submitted to WorkPro, we have a service level agreement that every check will be opened within 30 minutes of receiving it. Once it's been submitted to to ACIC, providing everything is in order, you can expect your checks to be turned around within about 20 minutes or so. So within the hour, you can expect to have your police checks back. Of course, there are some that take longer, that they're referred. We have no control over refers. The process that ACIC take with that is a very manual investigation, and they'll take as long as they need. So all I can say to you is sit tight. It can take up to 21 days, 22 business days to be returned in some cases. So again, WorkPro has no control of it. There's no point in calling WorkPro and asking for an update. We are not even able to speak to ACIC about that particular check. So as soon as the check has been returned and it's been finalised, you'll receive an email alert, welcome back into the WorkPro dashboard, and you'll see that the check has been finalised, in which case you'll see police check that has been finalised, and you'll see here no disclosable court outcomes in this case. So just before I conclude this webinar, the no disclosable court outcomes, disclosable court outcomes, referred, certificates, and how we secure information and how we take control of the destruction of this information against very strict legislative requirements. After 90 days, a candidate can contact WorkPro and request for their police check to be removed from our system. If that happens, we will be in touch with you. We will advise you that the applicant has applied for that. They do have the right to do that. We will remove the certificate from their profile in WorkPro. However, they do understand that the outcome of the check will always be stored here because that is a compliance requirement at your end. So you'll just see simply that there is no disclosable court outcomes or there is a DCO, disclosable court outcomes, and the date and the time that you processed that check and the purpose of that check. If the candidate doesn't request for their information to be destroyed from our system, our process is that after 12 months, the check, the actual certificate will be removed permanently and permanently destroyed from the WorkPro database, but you'll still see the outcome of the check and the date and the time that you completed that check for the role and what purpose that check was completed. WorkPro invoices on a monthly basis at the end of the month for the checks that have been completed during that month, and you'll receive a reconciliation. You'll receive an invoice and your responsibility to report and produce the reconciliation for those checks. Naturally, for those that you've asked the candidate to pay, you'll still see that candidate on your reconciliation. You'll still see the candidate result in your dashboard, but you won't be expected to pay for it, of course. The payment of a candidate police check is exactly the same as what you would be paying. So there's no change to that, even though we're administering that on your behalf. Similarly, if you ask us to manage the process on your behalf that you are paying, there's no additional fee to that. We can simply configure your system. I've taken up well enough time. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar today. If you have any questions, you can always call us on 1300 975 776, or we welcome your email at info@workpro.com.au, or you can reach out to your account manager if you would like to configure your system for the things I've spoken about today. Thank you for joining me, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks.